the Great Byzantine Palace. Today, Mosaic Museum. In this presentation, I will give you some general information on the Great Palace and its history during the Byzantine period, the Latin invasion, and the Ottoman period. Also, I will tell you about the architecture, what constructions were on the palace site, and what were its functions. After that, I will go on with the modern time, about the excavation, and the Mosaic Museum and the peristyle. When Constantine the Great came to the small provincial town called Byzantium in 330 AD, he envisioned a new great capital. He wanted to create a new Rome, following the model of the old Rome with 7 hills and 14 districts. Of course, he also needed a great palace to make the new capital worthy its dignity. This was the Great Palace. It was used for ceremonial feasts and as a residence for the emperor, and it was enlarged throughout the following reigns and centuries. To overlook the Sea of Marmara in the city, the Great Palace was placed between the Hippodrome and St. Sophia on the second hill of Constantinople. About the history during the Byzantine period. As I already told you, Constantine the Great came to Byzantium in 330 AD, and he wanted to create a new Rome. So he started the construction and the vision of the new capital and also the Great Palace. Until the 5th century, the Great Palace was called the Magnum Palatium. And also the city name Byzantium was renamed to Constantinople in honor of Constantine the Great. In 532, in January, the Nika riots started, and most of the area around the Augustine and the Great Palace was destroyed by a fire and the riot. So Justinian I had to clear all the central area, and he rebuilt the Great Palace and also the St. Sophia in a way greater style. For example, the massive dome of the St. Sophia. Going on with the history during the Latin period. The Latin period began with the Fourth Crusade in 1204. The Great Palace was massively damaged and pillaged and gradually fell into ruin. But before that, the residency already shifted to the Palace of Blakeney when Alexius I was the emperor of Constantinople. And also the Latin emperors after that resided in the Palace of Blakeney. History of the Ottoman period. The Ottoman period began when the Ottoman Turks fell and conquered the city of Constantinople in 1454. Until then, almost all structures of the Great Palace had become uninhabited ruins. The Ottomans reused the ruins and the area of the former palace to build new Ottoman mansions. In 1609, they built the Sultan Ahmet Mosque on top of the ruins of the former Palace of Daphne. Now, continuing with the architecture, I will tell you something about the construction of the palace complex and its functions. The Great Palace was situated on 3 different levels, which were enlarged and added over the years. During the reign of Constantine the Great and his son Constantius II, the upper level was mostly built. This level offered living and administrative buildings, such as the Palace of Daphne, the Chalke, the Skule, the Consistorium, the Augustine, the Hall of 19 Acubia, the Tribunal, also called the Dauphaks, the Senate, the Magnara Palace, the Catisma, the Baths of Zeuxippus, the Pastoral Courtyard, and several churches. Later, a second level towards the Marmara Sea was added, a private area consisting of several gardens, terraces, pavilions, the Crostricolios, the Tiscanisterion, the Nea Ecclesia, the Trichonos, and the Stigma. Because the palace did not have its own harbor, the third level at the seashore was added. It included a harbor, the Palace of Boucolion, which was later surrounded by massive defense walls, and a lighthouse. Because of its colossal damage and the holy constructions on the site of the Great Palace today, it is difficult to exactly reconstruct and locate all the structures of the palace. Most information on how and when buildings of the palace were constructed were drawn from the Book of Ceremonies by Constantine Porphyrianus in the 10th century. Nonetheless, I will give you some general information of the functions of a few important buildings within the Great Palace. The first one is the Augustaion. This was a public space for politics and markets, which was later closed for the public. The Augustaion, which contained a huge column with an equestrian statue of Justinian I, as you can see on the right upper picture, represented the start of the Mese and led to the Senate and Magnificence Palace, where ambassadors were received and court ceremonies were held. As you can see in the picture in the right lower corner, next to the Magnificence Palace was the entrance to the Sacred Palace. It was called Schalke and could only be entered by the emperor himself, his guards, or other important people. It was reconstructed multiple times and became a chapel with its own relics over the years. Close to the Schalke was the Skule, the quarter of the palace guards, from where you could go to a huge open court called Tribunal. The Tribunal, also known as Delphax, had several rooms on the sides, for example, the Hall of 19 Cubia. Serving for ceremonial feasts, the Hall of 19 Cubia consisted of 19 large tables with 12 beds each. Coming from the Tribunal, going through portico pathways, you would get to the Palace of Davne. In general, is to say that the Great Palace showed an abundance of gold, colorful marbles, statues, mosaics, colonnades, silk tapestries, and silver entrance doors. Especially the Palace of Davne during the Byzantine period was decorated impressively because it was used as a residency of the emperor and for special ceremonies. From there, the emperor could enter the hippodrome via a staircase to the Kathisma, which was the emperor's lodge. Also, on the upper level was the greatest bath of Constantinople, called the Xeuxippos. It was famous for its big collection of antique sculptures. However, also this building was destroyed and rebuilt because of the riot, but later used as a silk factory and prison. Going from the upper level to the Palace of Bucolion, you were passing several gardens and the Tiskanisterion, which was a polo ground built by Theodosius II. The Palace of Bucolion was built with its own harbour to overlook the Sea of Marmara. Furthermore, it was used as another residence for the emperor until the residency shifted to the Palace of Blakeney. The harbour, as you can see on the lower right picture, was famous for its statue displaying a lion fighting a bull and its marble pavements and steps towards the sea. Modern time. Only a few structures of the Great Palace remained until today. Being the Sultan Ahmed Mosque and its dependencies built on top of the former palace ground, it has been difficult to excavate the area. Just a few fractions of the House of Justinian and the Palace of Bucolion at the seashore of Marmara have survived. Yet, after a fire in the early 20th century, the area around the Sultan Ahmed Mosque could be surveyed for the first time. In 1935, the first excavation began and small parts of an apse hall with a peristyle was cleared. This peristyle courtyard with its fine mosaic flooring was a rectangular forecourt with a colonnade all around and an open area in the middle. A later survey in 1954 detected that the fourth side of the mosaic did not survive. In total, less than a quarter of the mosaic remained for excavations, which can be visited in the Mosaic Museum and the Sultan Ahmet Archaeological Park in Istanbul since 1987. The greatest findings of the excavations was the Peristyle Courtyard. The courtyard extends over 55.5 times 66.5 meters. It has 4 pathways, which were 7 to 10 meters wide. On 1,000 square meters of mosaics, of which less than a quarter survived, about 78 images and scenes are depicted. Besides the very few parts of the mosaic that could be excavated, another problem of surveying the palace site is the chronological assignment of the mosaic. Since excavation seems very difficult, it also has been difficult to find clear evidence to date the mosaic. Nonetheless, some pottery was found and evaluated with other data from excavations, which led to a most likely conclusion that the mosaic probably was created during the reign of Justinian I, 527 to 565. In contrary to this, other scholars date it to the 6th or 7th century because of stylistic characteristics. Considering the importance of stylistic evidence, it is necessary to take a closer look on the motifs of the mosaic itself. The mosaic consists of a huge variety of motifs and sticks out with the brilliant execution of technique, color, and combinations of marble and glass. Following J. Brett's interpretation, he divides the findings of the motifs into different groups: mythological, pastoral and agricultural, circus, and symbolic pastoral. Nevertheless, looking at all these different categories and the overall pictures of the mosaic, he concludes that they can be subsumed to one single theme, the pastoral and agricultural theme. Also can be said that each individual scene seems to have no relation to one another. They are put together randomly, maybe only in a decorative matter. One of the examples why Brett only speaks about pastoral and agricultural sceneries and not mythological sceneries you can see in the upper right picture where boys are playing with toy wheels. Here, Brett refers to a Hellenistic and Roman art of putti, where playing boys were displayed idealistically, angel-like, almost nude boys with wings. However, in the mosaic of the Great Palace, the boys are fully dressed and represent a more naturalistic perspective. The mythological character fades away. Another example of a more naturalistic perspective is the depiction of Orpheus playing guitar next to horses, as you can see in the picture in the lower left corner. Because it can be connected with the later Orpheus depictions, it has also lost its mythological character. Besides turning the ideological symbols to a more naturalistic motive, and by taking away its mythological character, quite the opposite happens to the pastoral depictions. The pastoral and agricultural scenes evoke romantic and poetic associations instead of a hard-working, realistic atmosphere. For example, the woman with a child, which expresses the longing for the quiet and motherly affection. Maybe this incoherency of motifs and scenes in the mosaic can also be explained by the young existence of the new capital of Constantinople, which did not have its own traditions yet, and therefore used impressions and symbols from the places that the emperors have been. This would also explain why it is so hard to interpret and date the mosaic on the basis of the stylistic characteristics. Thank you for listening, and on the following slides you can see my text and picture references.